Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews under the deck text. 'Tis the season, so on this episode of the Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on an evil presence commander from Commander Legends, Blim Comedic Genius. If anyone knows about giving gifts that keep on giving, it's Blim. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to scheduled videos on YouTube, and higher tier patrons get access to the VIP section of my Discord server as well. You can find a link to both down in the description too. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Blim is a 4/3 imp with flying for 2 generic, 1 black, and 1 red. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of target permanent you control. Then, each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. This is a donate effect similar to Zedru the Great-Hearted, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. Whereas with Zedru, you draw cards and gain life, with Blim, opponents discard cards and lose life. There's also one huge difference, which is that Zedru has access to 1 more color's worth of available bad presence than Blim does. Also, Zedru doesn't need to attack, you just pay 3 mana to donate things at instant speed. So which commander to use at the helm of a bad Xmas deck depends on your preference. That being said, Blim donates things without investing in mana. All you have to do is connect with him. One huge advantage that Blim has over Zedru though is that it has access to a lot of black cards that can make the opponents outright lose the game. Those aren't the only bad gifts either. So let's start with what gifts Blim can prank our opponents with. Let's start with the effects I just mentioned, the ones that can make opponents outright lose the game. Immortal Coil, Nefarious Lich, Lich's Mastery, Forbidden Crypt, and Demonic Pact have such a clause. These have a slight benefit, but the detriment greatly outweighs that, especially if the receiver can't take advantage of it. Demonic Pact is all upside except for its last mode, which means you have to donate it when it comes to that. Lich's Mastery prevents the controller from losing the game, but if it leaves the battlefield, they lose the game. In order to expedite their controller losing the game, Leyline of the Void is also included in the deck. Not only does this make Immortal Coil, Nefarious Lich, and Forbidden Crypt almost a guaranteed game over for that opponent, but it's also a good card in its own right. It shuts down graveyard strategies as well as preventing opponents from recovering anything from the graveyard. Captive Audience doesn't make the opponent lose the game outright like the previous mentioned effects do, but puts them in a situation very close to it when they have no choice than to choose the mode to drop down to 4 life. Its other modes aren't that beneficial to the controller either. As a bonus, this enchantment gives itself when it enters the battlefield. A Crowing Horse is another card that gives itself. It's not as detrimental as Captive Audience, but it does give 1/1 tokens to each of its controller's opponents. What's great about this, besides making Blim's effect stronger, is that you receive 1/1 tokens. So if you have no other bad gift to donate to an opponent but want to attack them with Blim, just give them a token. For the same reason, Keep is also included in the deck. Sometimes you might find yourself in a position where you have nothing bad to donate and what you control is too good to want to give away. So giving away weak tokens like Kobolds of Keep can come in really handy. That way you make your opponents discard and lose life per usual and you don't lose anything good. While making opponents outright lose is a pretty bad prank, as the saying goes, there are things far worse than death. Some gifts are going to want to make opponents wish they'd lost instead. Gifts like Aggressive Mining and Blood Funnel do just that. The former doesn't let them play lands and the latter complicates casting non-creature spells. Granted, it reduces the cost of their creature spells, but for every non-creature spell they want to cast, they have to sacrifice a creature. Aggressive Mining does give them the option of digging for answers, but only at the expense of sacrificing lands. Oh, and only once each turn. Experimental Frenzy provides another soft lock when donated to opponents who can't generate red mana. Why it's important to generate red mana? Because then they won't be able to destroy it, they're stuck with it. Granted, they can still play cards, they just have no real control over that. Once they play a land, and then they have a land on top of the library, they can't play it. Super evil. Steel Golem and Grid Monitor disallows them from playing creatures altogether. So if you more or less gauge what kind of decks opponents are playing, you can gift either of these to the creature-heavy deck while donating Blood Funnel to the Spellslinger deck. These creatures can be used to chump block or killed via other ways, so they're not necessarily as problematic a lock as the previous 2 enchantments. Evil Eye of Orms by Gore and Evil Eye of Urborg are some more gifts for creature-heavy decks since they practically shut down their combat phase. Pretty much only eyes can attack, so unless they have any changelings, they'll only be able to attack with either of these gifts. Evil Eye of Urborg is pretty strong at 6/3, so be careful with the retaliation from that one. Plague Reaver and Cinder Giant also mess with opponents as creatures. Just be careful who you give either of these to, since they might lose the other creatures you gifted them. So the ideal receiver of either of these gifts is a creature-heavy deck for which you have not given any creatures yet to that opponent. The Giant packs quite a punch, so be careful with that retaliation as well. Rust Elemental messes with its controller's artifacts. This won't necessarily set back the artifact heavy deck anytime soon, but anyone who has only mana rocks as their artifacts will surely feel the pain. Then, when they run out of artifacts, they get 4 damage when it triggers. It is a 4/4 flyer, so keep in mind who you gift it to because it could potentially block Blim. A Bestial Persecutor can also potentially block Blim when you donate it. However, it's a 6/6 flyer for 4 mana, so you don't really have to donate it as soon as you play it, once an opponent is about to die when you donate it. Otherwise, they won't be able to lose. When its controller loses the game, it returns to your battlefield per the rules, so that's a plus as well. Blim even makes a mockery of the very rules of the game with how it takes advantage of them. If Blim making opponents discard cards isn't enough, donating Pyromancer's Swath will get the job done. Again, careful who you give this to, since it will benefit spell-slinging decks and burn decks. Giving this to a player who isn't running red is ideal. This way, it'll be near impossible to keep a hand. Therefore, this should be gifted to that annoying player. Well, who am I kidding? The most annoying player in this game is going to be us. Smoke and Blood Moon are symmetric effects that are detrimental to almost everyone at the table, but most importantly, they're least detrimental to us. Smoke especially, since we're pretty much only attacking with Blim most of the time. Since their effect is symmetrical, it doesn't matter who controls them. So these are the kinds of gifts that makes it easy to find someone to donate with Blim. Conversely, if there are a lot of creatures attacking, Crown of Doom and Curse of Bloodletting make it so that their controller feels even more pain. What's great about the Crown is that you don't even need Blim to donate it. You can just pay 2 and gift it to someone else. Then they can't gift it back to you. Something important to note about curses is that while they enter the battlefield enchanting a particular player, you still control it. However, if you donate it with Blim to that very player or some other player, it's not going to matter since the player being enchanted by it is the same. Same goes for Curse of Opulence. Casting this enchants a player. However, you're the controller of it. Donating it with Blim won't change anything else about the enchantment, so anyone attacking that opponent still gets the gold token, and you're making Blim's effect stronger. This also goes with the other auras in the deck, which we'll see soon. Some explosive gifts we can give our opponents is Bronze Bombshell and Cosmic Horror. Bronze Bombshell blows up the moment it's gifted, but while you can't make the most of this gift in the long run, it does deal 7 damage right then and there, which is 20% of an opponent's life total. And those can add up pretty quickly with this deck. Same goes for the Horror. Naturally, you'd want to give this to an opponent who can't generate black mana. Otherwise, you're giving them a 7/7 with first strike that can end up being your comeuppance. Speaking of comeuppance, if we're in a position where we can't give away our gifts in time before they hurt us, getting stuck with that proverbial hot potato when the music stops, we need a fail-safe for when that happens. This is why the deck's running Despotic Scepter and Claws of Gix. These cards are so important I've put them in their own section in this deck video. With the Claws, you pay 1 and sacrifice a permanent as part of the cost, so even if the effect is responded to by an opponent, since the sacrifice is part of the effect's cost, the permanent you want gone will be so before anything else follows. The Despotic Scepter buries target permanent you control as part of its effect, meaning it's destroyed and can't be regenerated. Thanks to the way it's worded, this works on permanents you own but don't control. So if you donated something that ends up being more of a problem for you than an opponent, you can simply destroy it. Unfortunately, since it targets, it cannot be used to destroy Lich's Mastery since it has hexproof and you don't control it. In case of emergency, you can also Chaos Warp your own permanent. This is used mostly as a catch-all for any permanent on the battlefield that might be an issue for us, particularly opponents' things. But that doesn't mean we can't use it on our own permanents in case things go south. Blasphemous Act and Damnation are included in case the board gets too full of creatures since our deck is light on creatures. Either way, it's important to have responses in a deck, but these also serve double duty in also getting rid of any bad gifts we're unable to donate. Hopefully we don't have to worry too much about return gifts in a game. But at least these 3 cards are good regardless of what we control or not, while the first 2 are a must just in case some players can't take a joke or we become the butt of our own jokes. Some other gifts we can donate are those that benefits us before we even give them away to be a nuisance to our opponents. Xancha's Sleeper Agent is such a gift. In fact, she's such a great gift that everyone else can benefit from her except her controller. As a bonus, she even donates herself without the aid of Blim. Even though other players can benefit from the card draw, we do as well, so it's pretty synergistic. Humble Defector is another synergistic way to draw cards in this deck since it donates itself. Since being under an opponent's control hurts everyone except us, it puts opponents in a difficult position of giving it back to us and giving us the card draw, or giving it to a different opponent and still have Blim hurt them for it. Demonic Lore and Treacherous Blessing are also synergistic ways to draw cards. We draw 3 cards when they enter the battlefield, but then they become a nuisance. Unfortunately, we can't donate Treacherous Blessing because it becomes sacrificed when it gets targeted. Either way, we can still target it with Blim to get his effect. It's just that the donate effect fizzles, but we still have opponents lose life and discard cards. Underworld Connections might seem like it's a card draw effect that doesn't synergize with the deck, but remember what I explained earlier about auras. We control the land, and the aura gives the effect of the land. So even if an opponent controls it, they can't do anything with it except suffer from Blim's effect. We still tap down the land to draw a card at the cost of 1 life. The only non-synergistic way to draw cards in the deck is with Necropotence. This card is just too good to pass up and is not that difficult to cast in a 2-color deck. We can very quickly run out of steam and we need to get our responses and win cons quickly, especially when the entire table has the potential of ganging up on us. We do lose life each time, so keep that in mind. Since the deck is so dependent on Blim, we need ways to protect it. Gift of Doom is an amazing way to do so. Even its morph cost is beneficial in case we need to sacrifice a bad gift we could not donate just in case. Again, as with other auras, we can also donate this. It won't matter if an opponent controls it, it's still giving Blim Death Touch and Indestructible. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Whisper's Cloak can also prevent Blim from targeted spells and effects. Just be careful with the Cloak and the Greaves, since Shroud also prevents us from targeting it with any beneficial effects. Unfortunately, we cannot donate equipment since opponents will just equip it onto their own creatures, but these are the best equipment to protect Blim. The Cloak in particular, since it makes Blim unblockable. Speaking of, Prowler's Helm, Trailblazer's Boots, Dothi Embrace, Shizo Death's Storehouse, and Rogue's Passage also provide some excellent forms of evasion. Although the evasion granted by the first 4 cards are conditional, Rogue's Passage makes Blim outright unblockable. That being said, these effects are still amazing at making Blim nigh unblockable. The first 3 in particular will almost always make it unblockable. Shizo maybe not so much since black is a popular color and we are gifting black creatures to opponents. But that being said, it's still on a mana generating land that doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, so it doesn't take up a slot in the deck. Crawl Space and Silent Arbiter also help us somewhat in the combat department since we're really mostly only attacking with Blim. The Arbiter is great in making opponents only able to block Blim with a single creature if they were able to, but it also prevents the table from overwhelming us with creatures. Same with Crawl Space. Granted, they can still attack us with their biggest threats, but we're still able to respond to that. Since this might seem too slow a way to donate things, keep in mind that the way Blim's effect is worded. Thus, with either Fire Shrieker, Ember Cleave, Grappling Hook, or Blood Mist giving him double strike, we're able to donate 2 bad gifts in a single combat step. If we happen to have any other beaters at hand, we can also use any of those to make those even worse. But definitely these are mostly for Blim. Keep in mind that Blim has 4 power, so constantly attacking with it, even if it has double strike, can prove to be a clock on its own. Stronach Resonator and Lithoform Engine can also serve to duplicate Blim triggers. This might seem like overkill, but keep in mind that when an opponent loses or leaves the game, any permanents they control that we own go back to us under our control. So if we give an opponent a lot of gifts, all of them return to us and we might not necessarily be able to donate them all back again in a single turn. So giving Blim double strike and or doubling up on his triggers goes a long way. The engine is also pretty busted since it can copy any permanent spell, meaning we'll have 2 of the same evil gift to donate as well. Harmless Offering and Bazaar Trader are included in the deck not only to help us donate more than a couple of gifts in a turn, but in case Blim gets dealt with. Unfortunately, Bazaar Trader can't donate enchantments, but at least it can still donate evil artifacts and creatures. It's such a shame that Evil Presence is silver bordered. Otherwise, it'd be an amazing card in this deck. If your playgroup allows you to play with silver bordered cards in your deck, then definitely consider this one. Bonus points for comboing it with Phage the Untouchable. Another evil donate effect that you could add in your deck, but I didn't add in mine, is Scrambleverse. If annoying your opponents by giving them evil gifts isn't enough for you, try casting Scrambleverse, preferably while Blim is still in your command zone so you don't lose it. Not only will all non-land permanents exchange control at random, but it's very likely that most of those permanents they'll be controlling won't be theirs. So once that happens and you're able to swing in with Blim, it's going to be very epic indeed. Unfortunately, the deck doesn't have much in the way of land-based ramp due to its color identity. That being said, it is running Burnished Heart and Sword of the Animist. While it's a one-time only thing, the Elk can still ramp for 2 basics straight onto the battlefield. The Sword is even better since we're pretty much attacking with Blim each turn, so we get to ramp each turn. As a bonus, it also pumps Blim +1/+1. At least Black gives us access to Lake of the Dead and Cabal Coffers, as well as Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth to make the most out of both of them. These have the potential to generate a ton of mana if Blim's tax gets too high, or to simply just accelerate the deck. The deck's also running a conventional suite of mana rocks with Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Arcane Signet, Rakdos Signet, and Felwar Stone. Nothing special here. These are cheap enough to make the deck work, and we don't really need the legal moxes since we don't need Blim out as quickly as possible. Blim is better cast after we're able to gauge when to cast and then donate our bad gifts. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 8 fetch lands, Badlands, Blood Crypt, Canyon Slough, Smoldering Marsh, Graven Cairns, Tainted Beak, Dragonskull Summit, Sulphurous Springs, Luxury Suite, Command Tower, Reflecting Pool, Ancient Tomb, and Temple of the False God, as well as 5 of each snow basic covered basic land in case anyone's running anything that benefits us for it. As with all of my deck techs, you don't need Badlands if you're not playing online or don't already have it. You can easily swap it out for a budget substitute and the deck will run just fine. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Blim Comedic Genius. Although incredibly narrow, I love this archetype of giving bad things to opponents for value, just like Zedru the Great-Hearted. I hope Wizards designs and prints more commanders like these, as well as more bad gifts in the future, so that the variety of what to include in these decks increases. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link, that also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, happy brewing and happy holidays.